It's great to be here for the first. I love being first at anything because when you're involved in the first, you get to help create the culture of something. I happen to believe very strongly that this kind of thing is needed all over the world. I get to speak to students all over the world. That's one of the things I love to do the most. I've just come back from South Africa where I spoke in 6 universities, not all in cities like this, but 6 different universities across the country. We had summits there with urban planners in universities, summits with high-level industry leaders, in mining in particular, summits with politicians, all in universities, and then I got to speak to students, which I liked even more. And it's great to be with you tonight, so thank you for inviting me. My accent is Australian because 25 years ago I left Australia. I came to live in Europe and work across Europe. Have been doing it ever since. I first came to your country 24 years ago and have continued to plague you with my presence ever since. But it's wonderful to be here tonight. I want to talk to you for a few minutes tonight on the future and shaping the future of the Netherlands and Europe before it shapes you. And as a social futurist, I can tell you there are several things that are axiomatic about the future. The first one is that if you don't shape the future, it does shape you. If you, perhaps as a student or an alumni here tonight, do not have a vision, not just for the business you work in or the particular industry you're in, but the complete sector that you will be part of, someone else's vision for that sector or business will reshape you. Because one way or the other, influence is going to flow in this equation. The second thing I know to be true about the future is that to shape it, you must engage present change. I think you're aware there's no point in sitting back today and saying, well, the world is going to be X in 10 years' time, perhaps. I'm not going to do anything about it until I get there. Because the future is, after all, the accumulation of decisions made in the present. The third thing I know is axiomatic about the future is that change is not equivalent across all sectors. You know, when it comes to change, a change in technology in one area might cause a tidal wave of change, in one sector of industry, for example, but in another, hardly a ripple. I could give you examples of that if we had time. The future will not be wholly or totally unrecognizable to us. When I was a child, in 1927, I was told by my uncles and aunts, you know, that I would, when I grew up, we'd all be flying around in helicopters, like a TV show called The Jetsons. I know nobody here even knows what The Jetsons is, but it's a Jurassic Park cartoon, okay? It's that old. And this thing had people flying around in helicopters and hovercraft and junk like that. Now, of course, that hasn't happened. The future isn't totally unrecognizable. We play around with Wi-Fi and smartphones today that were unimaginable in our parents' generation, much less our grandparents. And yet when I came here the other day, I flew in a plane that was designed in the 1980s and built in the 1990s. So the change is not uniform. The rate of change is not uniform. And the final thing I know to be absolutely true about the future is that technology is not destiny. We are not, you and I, a product of the technologies we choose to adopt. We are a product of how we choose to use those technologies. Isn't that true? It's human choice that makes the difference between a wonderful future and something less desirable, whatever the technology we choose to employ. Now, there are several revolutions that will drastically change life in the Netherlands and Europe over the next 10 to 15 years. One of them, of course, is the ongoing digital revolution. And the digital revolution is opening up to us a thing we call open innovation. How many are familiar with this term? It's simply the idea that if we're going to solve social and global problems, we have to work together. We need convergent solutions. We can't have business here, politics here, economics here, all siloed, shut off from each other. We have to share ideas and even patents if we're going to deal with things like climate change, for example. And so in that spirit, because of digitization today, we have IT working with medicine. Anybody here a medical student? Thank you. All the tired-looking people study medicine, you know. Oh man, I'm doing it. It's hard. How many technology students here? Anybody? Thank you. He put his head up and looked around. Am I the only one? There's 3 or 4, that's great. We have IT working with medicine, working with what we call additive manufacturing, to most of us 3D printing, to give us the possibility within a decade of today of using a bio version of a 3D printer. That is a version that uses cellular material like that found in your body to build human organs from scratch for transplant purposes. This is a convergence of different industries working together to solve a problem. How many have heard of the Internet of Things? Billions of microprocessors built into everything from your garden sprinkler system at home to the food packaging in your refrigerator, all sending and receiving messages in the cloud, purportedly to make our lives easier. The Internet of Things. We have big data analytics because of the digital revolution. Any business students here tonight? Great. Very nice. Thank you for coming. You guys will know about big data. It's so important to business today. Simply put, it is the fact that we have networks of computers that are now so powerful in their capacity that they can crunch all the numbers coming in from all manner of mobile devices, whether it's your phone, the sat-nav in your car, the cash register at the supermarket, the hospital machine down the road in the hospital. All of this information can then be analyzed and used to predict things like marketing trends, economic shifts, political voter patterns, and it's not just theoretical, this big data, it's being used in very practical ways. It's being used to design furniture and houses and streets. And in some cities now in Europe, it's being used to design better crime prevention programs, big data analytics, because of the digital revolution. And for me, as I move around the world, one of the most exciting things to witness within the digital revolution is the emergence of social enterprise. How many are familiar with this term? Help me out here. It's simply put a departure from the old system in which we had business here and charity here, and the two hardly ever talked except when one needed money from the other. Today we have a middle ground. It's called social enterprise. It's business that is solving social problems in profitable ways. And so in Africa today we have a thing called M-Pesa or M-Pesa. And I was just in Africa a few weeks ago, as I said. It's a wonderful social enterprise because it provides people in rural areas who have old school phones. Do you know there's more phones in Uganda today than there are light globes in Uganda? But they're not smartphones. They're just old school Nokia like we used to use 10 or 15 or more years ago. They have phones, but they have no banks. And so two young students, two young social entrepreneurs had a great idea. Let's take some new school technology, put it in old school phones so that people can do basic banking transactions in rural areas. Today, listen to this, today, 70% of all households in Kenya have at least one person who uses M-Pesa or M-Pesa. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a successful business model. And it was set up to solve a social problem. All of this is possible because of the digital revolution. It has also made us more aware, has it not, of environmental issues. One that isn't talked about a lot is that by 2030, if we don't do something fairly soon, we will see silver reserves becoming chronically low. Now, silver is not as sexy as gold. It's not as cool to talk about as platinum. But without silver, we'd be in trouble. It's at the core of many pieces of medical equipment. It's at the core of electronics. Most of you know that. It's at the core of nuclear reactors. Do you know the internet today, in Britain where I live, accounts for 8% of power output. 8% of our power grid goes on our engagement with the internet. And that doesn't sound like much. But if we in Britain continue to engage with the internet at the rate we are today, by 2030 or so, we will be using 100% of our power on the internet alone. Which means that there'll be no power left for the refrigerator and no power left for your sexy new electric car, because it's all taken up on the internet. So we have problems we have to solve even without climate change. And the digital revolution is making it possible for us to innovate together to solve or at least address some of those issues. But there are some challenges with digital, and you will recognize them, I'm sure, here in the Netherlands, just as we do in other countries. The first is the problem of social cohesion. Technology gaps are now opening up because of digital. Now, I don't know if you understand how young the internet is. I remember when there was no publicly accessible internet. I went through 6 years of university as an architect without ever having the internet. I know, that's horrifying, isn't it? It's hard to believe I'm even alive and can stand up here today and breathe the same air as you. There was no internet not that long ago, except among universities and military strategists. 2025, 70% of the world, according to Cisco, will own a smartphone. 70%. And that's amazing, but 30% still won't get access to the opportunities that the smartphone affords us. There are gaps opening up in terms of debt today. This is in the press again today in Britain. And I do a lot of commentary on this issue because it concerns me greatly. Banks are losing 10 times as much money from credit debt than they were 10 years ago. Just individual people who can't pay back their credit debt. Part of the reason for this, and something that's not often talked about, is what I call digital debt. Cash has weight. I find it messy, cash. It gets dirty and crumples in your pocket and it's uncomfortable to carry around, but it has weight and I can feel it leaving my pocket. And I can understand that I'm running out of this stuff now. But if I reduce money completely to the ones and zeros of binary code through a wave and pay or even a biochip built into my hand, I have encouraged people to spend without forethought. And someone wrote to me today and said, well, that's just a generational thing. And I said, no, it's not. And there are reasons I can't give you right now because we don't have time. It's not purely, it's a generational thing. It's a human thing. And am I advocating that we all go back to cash and turn back the clock? No, I'm a futurist. By definition, I don't want to go backwards. But I think we have to be aware that debt gaps are opening up. Challenges with cognitive function. How many people have a good brain? Well, we're deciding on that. We'll just think about that for a while. I'm not sure. Well, do your brain a favor and discipline the way you do digital, because it's a great servant, a very poor master. Absent presence is growing in the business community today. CEOs that I talk to often talk to me about this. I've got 10 people in my boardroom. I've got 6 of them really there, really engaged, and the other 4 are tweeting under the desk. And a study in London 2 years ago discovered that 85% of people who do that in a boardroom are actually talking to someone else in the room. Which opens up all sorts of interesting questions, like why don't you just talk to one another? Shallow think. There's a lot of research now. It started in the United States about 5 years ago, but it's now global, suggesting that because we multi-screen so much, we're learning to think broad and shallow, but not narrow and deep. That is to say, we know a little bit about a lot, but we don't necessarily know a lot about a little. Can I suggest to you, if you are still a student tonight, specialize in something. Choose 1 or 2 things and just become a real expert in those, because at some time in the future, somebody's going to want to know about your specialty, and there'll be a leverage point for you. We have transactional relationships with machines now. My wife and I, she's not here tonight, because we've been married, we just celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary, and don't be so surprised. I mean, I'm not... How does he do it? The question is how she does it. That's the question. We formed a transactional relationship when we got married, because you see, my wife Davina remembers some things extremely well. I remember other things sort of moderately well, and together we get it right at least some of the time. That's a transactional relationship. We do that now with machines. We don't remember everything we learn on the internet. We rely on the machine to remember it. We put it in Pocket or Evernote or some other platform, and because some of that information doesn't make it into our long-term memory, it can produce no innovation. Because new ideas, ladies and gentlemen, are always born out of connections between old or existing ideas. That's the way the brain works. And because it doesn't get as far as long-term memory, it can't produce benefits in terms of innovation. And we have the challenge of social disinhibition. Any psychology students here tonight? Ah, straight up the hand goes. Proud of it. Good on you. Psychologists call this social disinhibition. I love psychologists because they have great words for things. Social disinhibition is essentially the idea that people will do and say things online they would never say or do offline. And so 2% of 2,000 British people last year in a survey said, I have insulted someone I didn't know in the last year online. Now, 2% of 2,000 doesn't sound like much, but if you extrapolate that across the whole population of Britain, it means that 2 million British people have been insulted in the last year by 2 million other people they don't even know. That's a lot of insults flying around. And these are just some of the many things we could talk about that are challenges with the digital. One of them is time starvation. Do you know that 20% of office workers in the United Kingdom answer 50 emails a day from their colleagues alone? Not their clients, not their procurement partners, not their alliance partners, their colleagues in the same building, essentially. Our brains need downtime. They need time to be able to digest and assimilate what we are learning and experiencing. And if they don't get that time, we are less productive. And this is costing American business between $31 and $40 billion a year in terms of lost productivity. The second great revolution that is going to shape the Netherlands and Europe is the robo-lution, the automation revolution. 15 years ago, Sony couldn't get a robot to walk. Now they can run and walk and play football and even greet presidents at trade shows in Japan. If you go to a mobile phone store in Tokyo, the first, quote, being you encounter will be an emote bot, a machine that has been programmed using software designed at Cambridge University to read your facial expressions, gauge your emotions, and respond in kind. 1,000 aged care homes in Japan now use these bots to deal with aged care clients. And in a recent survey, 85% of the aged care clients said, I actually prefer the robot carer to the human variety. This is the robotics revolution. And of course, it is the foundation of what we call Industry 4, which is essentially the death of old school factories where everything is done under one roof. It's the introduction of small production units, all doing one part of the production chain, spread over a large area, connected via the cloud, and run by machines that are self-repairing and self-programming. It has been said, only half jokingly, that in the office of the factory of the next 5 years, there'll be one man and one dog, and the man's job will be to feed the dog, and the dog's job will be to make sure the man doesn't touch any of the machinery, because these things will run themselves. That's the basis of Industry 4. You say that's sci-fi, that'll never happen. Well, Wi-Fi was sci-fi 10 years ago. One of the challenges with robotization is obviously the challenge of human autonomy in an age of machine automation. How do we humanize the digital? How do we humanize the robotic world? 230 million industrial jobs globally will be automated over the next 20 years. 35% of all jobs in the UK will be automated in the next 20 years. 40% of all jobs in Australia, where I was recently, will be automated in the next 20 years. And it's not just low-end jobs anymore, ladies and gentlemen. Most of you are training for professions. It's not just the blue-collar work, we used to call it, the lower-end manual labor that will be replaced by robots. Professions will too. So autonomy is a challenge. So is surveillance. Now, I know that you're supposed to, many of you, belong to a generation that doesn't care about privacy, but I know that's not true. The Samsung television people know that too, which is why last year they issued a warning to all people who use a Samsung smart TV. Did you see this? It was a worldwide cautionary note they sent out saying, we need you to be aware of something. The voice recognition technology that is in our televisions, which allows you to give commands, is actually able to store entire conversations you have in the cloud. And we are concerned now that hackers are getting access to our clients' conversations. So, ladies and gentlemen, your television is watching you now. There's the challenge of biohacking. If we do, as right now the Swedish government is deciding whether they will encourage their citizenry to have an RFID, a radio frequency ID tag, as big as a grain of rice, inserted in their skin to use in place of what we in London call an Oyster card. There are businesses like Epicenter Workstation in Sweden that have been doing this for some time. You have the thing inserted, you can open the security doors at work, run the photocopy machine, even buy your lunch in the canteen. It sounds very sexy, but we have the challenge of biohacking. You know, I know, anyone who knows computers knows, any computerized device can, at least in theory, be hacked. I know they can track me using my phone and triangulation, but I'm not sure I want my body to be a hackable and trackable device. And there's the issue of chip theft, by the way. I can steal your cash without stealing your identity or doing you any damage. I don't have to be violent to steal your cash, but I do have to be violent to steal a chip inserted. So these are big questions to do with the automation processes. When I go to universities, I am so impressed with the questions that get asked about means versus ends. Do we spend so much time playing with the gadgets that we don't have any time to think about what we're producing? Are we just building faster machines to take us nowhere? It's students often that ask the questions about the law of unintended consequences. Do we give enough thought to the future implications of present-day technologies? It's students, in my experience, who most often ask the questions about the line between human and machine. As we invite technology into our bodies through nanobots and biochips, will we lose the line between humanity and technology? Is that even important? You are at the forefront of the search for a new ethic, and it will be revolutionary in the next 10 to 15 years in politics, in business. Do you know in America today, a growing number of businesses, mainly driven by millennials, are switching from return on investment as a measure of success to what they now call return on community. So they're no longer saying a successful business is one that just makes bucks. They're saying a successful business is one for whom the primary value is adding value to the community. That's very significant in a Western capitalist system. The very nature of capitalism is changing today because of this new ethic. Why are Uber and Airbnb always in the courts in Europe? Is it because they're bad people? No, it's because the government doesn't know how to structure and regulate something that isn't institutional. We've had for decades and even centuries an institutional economic model driven by institutions that are approved by government. But now people are doing things person to person through digital and so on, and that's a lot harder for government to regulate. It's opening up a whole new understanding of what ethics means, based on things like the sharing economy. In London, where I'm from, you can share-own a car, a bicycle, an electric bicycle. You can share-own a motor scooter. You can share-own an apartment. Even a room within an apartment can be share-owned. The reason why millennials and Gen Edgers between them are driving the ethic revolution and will continue to do so over the next 10 years, I hope that's true, is because you put a premium on trust. Think about it. Almost everything you do online, and because of you we now do online, has the trust as its currency. Trust isn't just a commodity like it was in the age of eBay. Now it's a currency. You can't trade without trust. And the Edelman Communications Group every year conducts a survey. 33,000 people in 28 countries are quizzed about how much they trust public institutions. So it looks at the relative levels of public trust in public institutions like government, like media, like the energy sector, like education and academia. And these two graphs on this slide show you where the Netherlands is situated. First of all, on the far right, on your far left, is the informed public. That's you. People who are in touch with the world, reading a lot, listening to the news, engaging. 62% of people in the Netherlands who are engaged with change say they trust public institutions across the board. That is the median across the board, all public institutions, 62%. That may sound high to you, but in global terms it isn't, 62%. In the mass population, outside of you, the people who maybe aren't as engaged as you, 52%. It's even lower. Now this is important, and the Edelman people said this year, this reflects a global implosion of trust, the lowest ever ratings we've ever seen globally, they said. High trust means capacity to act. Some of you are going to lead businesses. Some of you are going to lead media organizations. Some of you will be leaders in academic fields. Some of you will lead new technologies. And I'm thankful for what you will do. But as leaders, the amount of trust you engender in others is the thing that gives you the right to influence people. People will allow you to influence their lives and produce change through your services and products only if you have a high degree of trust. I think we learn a lot from Mandela. How many find Nelson Mandela still a very inspiring character? I learned so much from watching this man from a distance. I've been going to South Africa for 26 years. I've seen a lot of changes. But this man embodied what we're talking about here because he knew that trust is made up of three things. First of all, your personal expertise. If you are a leader of anything, you have to be able to do what you purport to do. You have to be good at what you do, that's obvious. The second is your integrity. Are you who you claim to be? And the third, which is often left out, is your commitment to the common good. Mandela never claimed to be the president of Black South Africa, though he could have done. He never claimed to be the president of coloured South Africa, as they used to call it, though he could have done. He claimed his only interest was representing all South Africans, even those who previously had no time for him. This is what we call in civic circles the common good. It is essential to trust. People need to know whatever it is you lead, that you're not just there for those who like you and those who use your services and products. That you're there in some degree anyway for the wider population. And I do believe if you're a leader in the making here tonight or already in leadership, the most urgent question you can ask is what kind of city do I want to live in 10 years from now? And what can I do to set that in motion?